Let's go ahead and prove that these two triangles are congruent, or die trying. Okay, probably not the second part, but let's do our best, keeping in mind that maybe they aren't congruent. So let's start out with what we know. All right, so they told us that segment AE is congruent to segment BD, and that they're parallel as well. In addition to that, they told us that angle E and angle D are congruent. There's a couple ways of going about this, but one of the things that I tend to find useful is to not worry too much about how I'm going to prove something and just kind of look at it and say, well, what can I find? What's some additional information that would be easy to locate? And they did tell me that these two lines are parallel to each other. So why don't I look at those two parallel lines and a transversal and see if I can find anything else that's congruent? So I'm going to do that by highlighting here. Now I can only pick one transversal, so I have to be careful here. But really, I mean, I also don't have to be that careful. I can just kind of mess around with it. But keep in mind, I'm trying to use both triangles here. And so if, for example, I picked this transversal, well, that doesn't really include any angles from this second triangle. So I'm going to pick the other possible transversal. This is actually looking really good. Now, if you can't see it, I'd recommend drawing this out separately, but I can see pretty clearly here that I've got angle A here and angle B, and those are corresponding angles. So those are going to be congruent to each other. And that was by the corresponding angles theorem. And now I have three pieces of information. I have two pairs of congruent angles and two congruent sides. So it's very likely I have enough to solve that, because if you notice, every single one of these has three pieces of information. I have angle, side, angle. And if I look at my list here, yep, that is a postulate. So based off what I've already written here, I actually have already proved this, that triangle. Now we have to be careful here. Let's make sure that we've got them in the right order. So I'll color code them. That's usually helpful. This is where it can get a little confusing. The last one is actually going to be B and C again, because B is in both of them and it actually represents two different angles here. So now that I have that organized, let's go ahead and write that out. I've got two triangles that are going to be congruent. So I'll start out with that. And I've got that A, this angle, lines up with B for this triangle. And then E corresponds with D. And lastly, this angle here, which is actually EBA, but the vertice is just B, lines up with C in this case. So it's this angle and that angle there. And we could verify this. I encourage you to maybe pause the video and verify all of the sides as well. But you know, it is in fact correct. And that is how we can pretty easily organize all of our information and verify that two shapes are in fact congruent. Well, two triangles in this particular case are congruent.